NHS Trust had provided better care. Other babies suffered skull fractures and were left severely brain damaged. The head of the inquiry, Donna Ockenden, was highly critical of the Trust, saying it didn't learn from its own inadequate investigations.
We now know that this is a trust that failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. This resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many of our families. The review team is particularly concerned by the lack of transparency internally within the Trust, as well as the lack of honesty and transparency shown to families.
Reverend Charlotte Cheshire's son suffered life-changing injuries after a traumatic birth.
My son will never live the life that he might otherwise have had, and the images that my late husband saw in intensive care that day literally haunted him with nightmares until the day he died in 2020. That is not the experience of becoming a parent that any parent should have, but that's what we live with.
The parole board has decided the mother of baby P, who died after months of abuse, should be released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son Peter at their home in North London. He suffered more than 50 injuries, despite being on the at-risk register. The parole board cited Connolly's progress whilst in custody and time on licence as reason for the decision. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of breaking the ministerial code and lying about the Downing Street parties. That's after the Met Police found coronavirus laws were broken during lockdown and it issued 20 fixed penalty notices. Number 10 maintains Boris Johnson didn't mislead Parliament when he claimed the rules were followed. During Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader asked when he was going to step down.
He told the House no rules were broken in Downing Street during lockdown. The police have now concluded there was widespread criminality. The ministerial code says that ministers who knowingly mislead the House should resign. Why is he still here?
Well, meanwhile, Boris Johnson criticised Sir Keir for being inconsistent and says the government is concentrating on the cost of living.
You do at least expect some consistency from this human weather vane. It was only a week or so ago where he was saying that I shouldn't resign. He's got to make what is his position, Mr. Speaker? Investigators must get on with their job, but in the meantime, they should. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our job, and what we are focusing on is tackling the cost of living, helping people.
More than 4 million people have now fled Ukraine, according to the UN Refugee Agency. That, says British military intelligence, shows Russia is compensating for setbacks on the ground with increased missile strikes. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says Russia's claims that it's pulling back from the Ukrainian capital doesn't stack up.
We received yesterday information. Right now the Russian forces move away from Kiev. It's not true. Whole night we listen to sirens. This means a rocket attack, and we listen a huge explosion east of Kiev and north of Kiev. It's means battles there. The people died, still died.
More than 50,000 spectators have paid tribute to cricketer Shane Warne at a state memorial service in Melbourne. Performances were given by Sir Elton John and Coldplay's Chris Martin, whilst tributes came from Shane's children, along with former teammates and fans. The former leg spinner, considered one of the greatest of all time, died aged 52 earlier this month from a suspected heart attack whilst on holiday in Thailand. Shane's father, Keith, said his son had lived an extraordinary life.
Friday, the 4th of March, 2022, darkest day in our family's life. It was a day that our son, Shane Keith Warne, was tragically and suddenly taken from us. Looking forward to a future without Shane is inconceivable, but we do take comfort in knowing that Shane packed more in his life of 52 years, 5 months and 19 days than most people would in 2 lifetimes.
Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's On the Money with Liam.
And coming up on the money today, £6 for a pint? Crikey. But that's the average price for a beer in London. And in Birmingham and other major UK cities, prices aren't that far behind. As pub industry bosses warn that spiralling fuel bills and the soaring price of barley are pushing up costs, we ask, can the Great British Pub and the broader lockdown-battered hospitality industry survive this cost of living squeeze? We host a detailed discussion. Plus, what do small and medium-sized firms accounting for half the UK economy, 2/3 of employment, think of Rishi Sunak's spring statement? And the roots of education are bitter, but the fruits are sweet. Not my words, but those of some bloke called Aristotle. We examine the impact of the type of education we receive on earnings and attitudes in later life. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today, we meet Anders Aslund, the celebrated Swedish economist who played a leading role advising the Russian government during the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed. What's his take on events in Russia and Ukraine? That's later in the show. And as ever, we want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews, or message me personally @Liam Halligan. But stay with us. This is GB News on TV and DAB plus digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused global shortages of barley, as neither country can export large quantities of any foodstuffs, at least not to the West. And as barley prices soar, the cost of a pint is also going up. Russia and Ukraine account for almost a quarter of global barley exports. Ongoing conflict means sanctions on Russian exports, and ships can't get to the Black Sea to transport barley from Ukraine either. So the worldwide price of barley has surged, and it's the raw material for beer. UK brewers are now paying around 30% more for barley than they were this time last year. Marston's Brewery, which has about 1,500 pubs, has spoken out about soaring energy prices and operating costs. And Suffolk-based Adnams, they've got about 70-odd pubs. They're warning of price rises during the second half of this year. The reality is beer prices are already going up, and they vary hugely across the country. The average price of a pint across the UK as a whole is currently £3.96. In Sheffield, it's a bit less, at £3.87. But in Birmingham, it's £4.46. And in London, it's almost £6. Unbelievable. Yesterday, the boss of Young's, one of the UK's largest pub companies, appeared on the money. He explained why even these eye-watering beer prices are set to rise even more.
Unfortunately, it's not just barley prices, but barley prices alone are driving prices up by can as much by 30, 40p a pint. Now, if it was barley alone, we could probably accommodate a standard annual increase, which may be about 10 to 15p a pint. But when you've got unprecedented cost increases like energy over 200%, national living wage, national insurance, pretty much every cost line a business operates at the moment are going up at least 6%. So it's a tsunami of cost increases that I have not seen in my 40 years in the sector.
If pubs passed on increases in costs entirely, says Patrick Dardis, including barley, heating, wages, tax and everything else, beer prices would have to go up by no less than 70%. And that's from one of the UK's most respected pub industry bosses. Now, Britain lost over 1,000 pubs during lockdown, plus numerous cafes, countless restaurants. The hospitality sector employs 1 in 10 workers, many of them from lower income backgrounds. And again, this vital industry is being hammered, this time by the cost of living squeeze. The hospitality industry's been on a 12.5% emergency rate of VAT during the late part of lockdown, but that goes back to 20%, the full rate, on Friday. Another blow. And that's our On the Money question today. Can British pubs withstand this cost of living crisis? Grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. And today I'm joined by Alan Miller. He previously founded the Old Truman Brewery and the Vibe Bar, iconic London drinking venues and dance houses. He's now the co-founder of Together Declaration and campaigns for the hospitality industry. It's also a pleasure to welcome back Simon Delaney, the landlord of the Furbank Pub and Kitchen in Manchester. Simon, great to have you with us. And in the studio, it's well-known tippler, beer drinker, real ale aficionado. That's me. Oh, no, it's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, the co-founder of Regionally. This is a really serious conversation. The pub sector, the hospitality industry, it is a major employer for the UK, particularly part-time work, particularly for women and younger people, particularly for people on lower incomes. So let's go to you first, Simon. You are the landlord of a well-known pub in Manchester. What are your thoughts as barley prices spiral, as wage bills spiral, heating bills spiral, taxes are about to go up, VAT's about to go up? Can your pub survive?
Wow. We're just taking each week at a time, to be honest. We don't really have a plan into the future because obviously we're already recovering from COVID and the pandemic and everything else. And lots of people in our industry are already dreading April, like you say, with all the extra things that we were already contending with, the utility bills soaring right through the roof, VAT going back to normal. So all them things were already there. And now we've got the cost of living and going right up through the roof and disposable income. That's the bit that's important to me. How much disposable income have people got? When I think of choice, people come to the pub out of choice. We're having to deal with the fact that diesel, we've got to be able to drive our cars, we've got to be able to operate. But as that disposable income gets smaller and smaller and smaller, I just don't know what the answer is. And, you know, we're going to be looking to the brewers. Some of these brewers, the small brewers, I feel for them because they've got the cost of barley. But you've got some big brewers in the world, you know, the likes of Heineken, who make billions of pounds profit every year. I'm hoping that they'll take on board some of the, you know, not pass it on to us, the cost of barley and everything else. But is that going to happen? Are the government, I think the government, are they going to help us? I think we're done with the help from the government. I really do. I think that suggested that in the spring budget that we've just had when nothing was said for us and there was no further help.
Alan Miller, you and I talked a lot during lockdown. The hospitality industry was obviously getting hammered during that period for, you know, it was completely locked down itself for months on end. Who would have thought there'd be a brand new crisis for your industry to contend with? What are you hearing about pubs, clubs, restaurants, cafes, particularly in the capital?
Yeah, well, I mean, we would have thought it because we said that one of the consequences of locking down was enormous damages to business, families, employees and the sector, not just the hospitality sector, but actually 15,000 venues were lost in hospitality throughout. Let's remember that in Britain, we have the second highest tax on beer, as it happens, over 50p a pint. And people were talking about the cost of living crisis way before Ukraine, the decision about whether people should be able to heat or eat. All sorts of measures on top of lockdowns and restrictions and the suffocation of the entire economy, things like vaccine mandates that impacted supply chains, truckers, ports, because obviously Ukraine is not the only place that barley is grown, the States and elsewhere, and all of those things have been impacted. And we think it's really important with the public inquiry that we get to the bottom of the decisions that were made. Where was the cost-benefit analysis for imposing lockdowns and restrictions on all of society? Why were those decisions made when people were warning of the collateral damages? And what are the consequences now? The other thing about the energy situation is we need a much more robust approach. Nuclear, a range of things that include fracking. Some people are very concerned about all sorts of issues, but we have to get a robust approach that isn't constantly trying to reduce, but is thinking about creative ways to stimulate employment, growth, development. That's what leadership needs. That's what we require. And the Together Declaration, we have many, 300,000 our signatories. We're getting the public to both comment and respond to the terms of reference with the public inquiry, but say to elected representatives, we should not now be in a position where in stagflation, soaring prices means that ordinary people are just left to one side. We need to get to grips with this immediately.
Two very entrepreneurial gentlemen there, Justin.
Yep.
In our two major cities, well, Birmingham as well. They are looking ahead and they don't like what they see. Rishi Sunak did have some tough choices to make in the spring statement. Obviously, he was boxed in by all that COVID lockdown spending, which Alan Miller referred to there. Could he have delayed raising VAT for the hospitality industry back to 20%? Because along with all the other things that are happening on Friday, you've got the council tax rise coming in, you've got VAT returning as well to 20%.
Last week, we were sitting back and looking at what we were talking about 6 months ago. And basically, it was most of this. We obviously didn't know about the war at that stage. But a lot of these issues, particularly about inflation and how that could be heading into a stagnating economy potentially next year, the growth figures were far too optimistic. And so, yes, planning could have been done for this. This is not just a minor issue with a bit of heating issues. This is
a tenth of our economy.
So it really does take some initiative to actually making sure the confidence, remember that's the key word in the economy, confidence to make sure that consumers think, yes, I can go out and spend. Yes, I'm going to have a job. And as an investor, as running a company, that actually the economy is still going to be growing. At the moment, particularly after last week's debacle, frankly, that's taken a lot of confidence out of the economy, and people sitting there saying, well, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen next, except I know those fuel bills are going to go up, and later in the year, I've got a whole lot more inflation coming through because of what's happening in Ukraine right now.
Simon Delaney, let's go back to you. This is an important industry, the hospitality industry. It employs a tenth of our workforce, as I said. There are psychological benefits. We get together, we drink, we dance, we live our lives. Really, really important stuff. But let me ask you this. Given that barley prices are where they are, given that beer's brewed all over the country, why is there such a regional variation? Why is the cost of a pint so much less in Sheffield, for instance, than it is in Birmingham?
That's something I can't actually answer. We work on a gross profit. We buy it in at X amount of pounds, and we need to make 55% GP gross profit on that. That's how we do it. So whether the brewers and these different pricing structures from the brewers, the suppliers down south to what there is up north. But in saying that, we've got our gross profit has got to cover our overheads, and I'm guessing that the overheads down south are much higher than what they are up north. We've got that divide. That's the only thing I could explain it. But we're going to have to increase our gross profit to cover our increased overheads, which are spiraling through the roof. The national minimum wage has gone up. My staff are all paid more than national minimum wage, but we have to increase their wage to keep that gap in place. And we're not all of a sudden taking more money. We've only just had a taste of normality for the last 2 or 3 weeks, where we've actually broke even, where it feels normal. And then all of a sudden this happens, and you just don't know what's around the corner. And I don't think the government, you give the figures there about how much revenue in tax the hospitality industry makes. It's as if the government doesn't value that, how important. And this isn't just about drinking. This is about, and I've mentioned this before on your show, we have the elderly people who come in for the community lunch and drink tea and coffee. If these places aren't around, they lose all of that.
Alan, let's try and be a bit upbeat here. I know it's difficult. I know you're deeply concerned. You've been in the pub business, hospitality business for many, many years, if I may say so. But this is a mainstay of the British economy, isn't it? We're famous around the world for our pubs, our clubs, our hospitality industry. Surely we can survive this.
Well, we're the fifth biggest sector in the UK, over 60 billion per annum, almost 6% of the GDP. It's absolutely about getting together, about having fun, but it's also about cities regenerating. It's about tourism. It's about new urban developments where people move in because they want the vibrancy of the activity. It's about where we get the next cultural phenomenon, whether it's a Stormzy or an Adele. It's like in bars and clubs. And the only way that that's underwritten, all the costs, is by the sale of alcohol and some food. And we've got the best professionals and entrepreneurs in the UK, really global standard, highly professional, brilliant. But the thing is, what we now need to do is have an approach that's robust, where the government made many decisions. I think they were very problematic, locking down the whole of the economy, restrictions, the impositions, particularly on hospitality. We need a reckoning about that. But we also know that whilst the Ukraine is exacerbating things, these things have been coming down the pipeline for a while. We need to be able to have solutions that include all sorts of creative investment
Give me
in
one
energy
policy,
solutions.
Alan. Give me one policy, your Boris Johnson elevator moment. What's the one thing you want him to do that's fiscally realistic?
Well, we could definitely keep back VAT for a while. I'd also say reduce duties on beer. Why are beer the second highest in Europe next to Finland? Why is that Britain's got that? And then also we need to talk about what's going on with rent and the backlog from lockdowns. There's a whole range of issues. But the most important thing is to have a really robust strategy for energy. We have not had that. We've been sluggish. Nuclear, electrification, retraining, proper investment between the state and private enterprise. Let's get creative. Let's get dynamic, rather than just trying to have reductions in things. That's the way we're going to get out of this situation, to be creative and develop and, do it in that context.
Well, gentlemen, I wish you both the very best of luck with your various businesses and enterprises in the pub sector, across the hospitality industry, as this cost of living squeeze develops. You're always welcome here on The Money. Simon Delaney there of the Furbank Pub and Kitchen in Manchester, and Alan Miller of the Together Declaration, founder of Truman's Brewery and the Vibe Bar in London's East End. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be discussing whether the Chancellor's spring statement has done enough for the survival of our small businesses in general. And your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On The Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:25. Now, there's little spring in the steps of many small business owners and the self-employed. Rishi Sunak's spring statement has been slammed for not doing enough to tackle the UK's cost of living crisis. And the Chancellor said he wanted to help small businesses, increasing the employment allowance to £5,000. But with
the employment allowance cuts small businesses' tax bills, making it cheaper to employ workers. In my first budget 2 years ago, I increased that allowance. Today, I'm going further. From April, the employment allowance will increase to £5,000. That's a new tax cut worth up to £1,000 for 500,000 small businesses, starting in just 2 weeks' time.
But as inflation spirals and cost squeeze continues, and new tax burdens coming in. How will our small businesses survive? I'm joined now in the studio by Emma Jones. She's CEO and founder of small businesses support platform and provider Enterprise Nation. And Justin Urquhart-Stewart is still with us. Emma, great to have you in the studio. Thanks for joining us. Was this a spring statement for small businesses?
Well, certainly the clip that you've just played was about the only point at which we were cheering. So we started with Spring Statement. We did a live small business reaction. So we literally charted the responses of small businesses as the Chancellor stood. And essentially what we didn't get was the confidence boost we wanted. Small businesses do feel worn out. They've dealt with lots of challenges over the past couple of years. And they wanted a bit of a break, but they also wanted someone to champion them and celebrate what they'd done. So that sadly didn't come through. The employment allowance was good news. There's some good news on things like R&D tax credits.
That's when you invest in new technology and research, you can offset the expenditure against your tax bill, right?
And it's great because it just means that it brings your tax bill down. So what the Chancellor did is he extended the type of things that you can claim your credit for. So that was good news. The employment allowance was good, but of course, national insurance contributions still going to go up. Corporation tax is going up.
Next year, it's 19 to 25%.
Next year. So what small businesses are looking at, and bearing in mind, small businesses do tend to be very optimistic by nature, so it takes a lot to bring down their mood.
Yeah.
But what they're looking at is still a little bit of Brexit disturbance. There's still difficulties of getting products in and out of the UK. They're trying to hire talent and the costs of that are going up. And then, of course, the tax is going up as well. So they're kind of looking down the line and saying, come on, give us a little bit of joy. And sadly, it wasn't forthcoming in the Spring Statement.
We talk about SMEs, don't we, Justin? Small and medium-sized enterprises. But it's a bit of a misnomer because they're mighty important in the economy. It's the big companies that hog the headlines. They tend to get more airplay with journalists, but not here on the money. We focus on these SMEs.
Well, the SMEs, that's the largest employer in the country.
Yeah.
That's the one. Where do new businesses come from? Not large ones. They come from small ones. We start a lot of businesses. We start more businesses than France and Germany put together. But we're absolutely useless at funding the growth of those businesses. So if you want to actually raise money for, say, 500,000 to, say, 15, 20 million, it's too small to be big, so the institutions are too big to be small, so the small investors can't help you either. So you're stuck. We need some reform here, as we've seen elsewhere, to get more money into growing businesses around the country, not just in London. Everything gets focused on London very much, and you then find it focused onto things like venture capital, private equity, which is too short term. Not 3 years, should be 5, 7 years, longer term, so SMEs can plan on a longer basis and make sure they plan their funding.
Emma, the government's been promising a sort of root and branch review on business rates for a long time. It's what businesses pay just on their premises, on their factories, on their capital equipment, if you like. They have to pay it whether or not they make profit, whether or not they even turn over any money at all. Are you hopeful that that will come soon? Are you hopeful that the government gets it? Just what a big burden those business rates are on many small businesses.
Well, it's been delayed by a number of chancellors because it's a difficult subject, so it's really hard to get it right when you take into account property valuations. Good news is small businesses still have a 50% relief. So that has continued. That was confirmed in the Spring Statement. But what small businesses want over and above everything else is certainty. So they want confidence in a system that works for them. Dare I use the words tax simplification? Woo. So, you know, Justin talks about how do we get money to growing businesses. There's a great sort of vehicle in the UK called EIS, Enterprise Investment Scheme.
Yeah.
It means people can fund companies and it's a great tax incentive. There's something called a sunset clause on that means it's going to end in 2025 unless the Treasury says, let's continue our commitment to it. So what small businesses do want is a little bit of certainty to know, will EIS continue? What will corporation tax rates and NIC rates be? Because they want to be able to plan. And of course, the more simplified you can make that, the better for a business owner when they're running their business, and budgeting for the business is almost the thing that they do on the side.
I think a lot of these tax measures that impact small businesses, Justin, they're the kind of tax measures they could stop a small business happening. So then you sort of end up with nothing. We often talk about if you tax too much, the rates go up too much, you end up with less revenue. And that seems to me to apply in many cases to our small and medium-sized enterprises.
And that's always been the issue. You want the economy to grow, that's how you earn more income. You know, to get more velocity of money going through the system. EIS, you mentioned, and SEIS as well. Absolutely vital to actually attract more money coming in. And I would add one letter to that, R, regional EIS, because a lot of it goes through the southeast again. Get that spread throughout the country. Now, getting more money going into the system, encouraging more money throughput, you're going to get some tax just on the movement of that money going through. That will help the coffers coming through.
You know what, Emma? In recent weeks and even months here on The Money, it's been pretty hard going. You know, there's a lot of bad news out there, not just, you know, lockdown continuing and obviously this ghastly conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The tax system seems to be punishing business and enterprise. But there are good things happening, aren't there? We are still a nation of entrepreneurs. We still have real, genuine commercial acumen and drive in this country.
Incredibly so. And start-up rates, again, Justin mentioned this, start-up rates during the middle of lockdown were at the highest they've ever been in UK history.
We're just irrepressible, aren't we?
We are, well, as we talk about it...
we never learn.
Entrepreneurship is now in the DNA of British people. We're called a nation of shopkeepers. We keep that entrepreneurship alive. Young people are now choosing self-employment over getting a job. So the future of entrepreneurship looks very bright. And small businesses are feeling confident about customers. And this is the incredible irony of what they're facing at the moment. Customers are coming in from both the UK and overseas. So small businesses are saying to us, the customer demand is there. What the points of friction are is how do I manage my supply chain? How do I sort my logistics? How do I hire the people that I need to service the customer demand coming in? So you're right, there's a lot to look forward to. The market is open. Technology hugely enables.
We will overcome.
Absolutely right.
We need to rename the show. We will overcome. Emma Jones, great to have you in the studio. SMEs are so important to the UK economy. We do try and focus on them here on The Money. And again, you're always welcome. Emma Jones there, CEO of Enterprise Nation. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks. And I'm delighted to say we're joined by Dr. Anders Aslund, a Swedish economist who's advised both Russian and Ukrainian governments. We'll get his take on the current crisis in just a moment. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom at 1:33. Repeated failures led to the deaths of 201 babies and 9 mothers at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust, with a damning report finding they could have survived if they were given better care. Catastrophic errors were made over a 20-year period, with other babies being left severely brain damaged. The head of the inquiry, Donna Ockenden, says the trust didn't learn from its own inadequate investigations.
We now know that this is a trust that failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. This resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many of our families.
The Parole Board has decided Tracy Connolly, who was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son Peter, should be released from prison. He'd suffered more than 50 injuries, despite being on the at-risk register. The Parole Board cited her progress whilst in custody and time on licence as reasons for the decision. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of breaking the ministerial code and lying about the Downing Street parties. That's after the Met Police found coronavirus laws were broken during lockdown and issued 20 fixed penalty notices. Number 10 maintains Boris Johnson did not mislead Parliament. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Don't go anywhere. On The Money, we'll be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. Now, I've never let schooling interfere with my education. So said Mark Twain. But how important is schooling in making us who we are? And in particular, how telling is the type of school we attend? Graduate recruitment specialists Bright Network found privately educated graduates expect to be paid 12% more in their first job than their state-schooled counterparts. And a third of state-educated students also think their background has hindered them in an application. But get this, a quarter of privately educated graduates feel the same way. Here to tell us more, it's James Uffendell. He's founder and CEO of Bright Network, which conducted the study. We also have state-educated Sophie Reynolds from Cambridgeshire. Good to have you both in the studio. And Justin Urquhart-Stewart is still with us. Let's talk to you, James, first about this research.
Thanks, Liam. So we've just released our research today. We've got over 600,000 graduates on our platform, and we're passionate about unleashing kind of bright young people. The research has found some fascinating things. So you're absolutely right. Private school educated students expect to start on £28,000 a year, but state school educated students expect to start on only £25,000 a year.
And these are graduates and graduates. We're not comparing. We're not. It's the research isn't skewed by the fact that private educated students are more likely to be graduates?
No, not at all. So these are members of our Bright Network community, through the 3 years when they're at university. So it's a really good barometer because every year we measure it and how they're feeling. So another big theme in the market, interestingly, picking up on your topic about kind of how we bounce back, is they are feeling a lot more confident. So they've just been through the worst recession in 300 years. Yeah. Before the pandemic, they were feeling roughly about 50% of all undergraduates felt they were going to get a job when they graduated. That then dropped to 39%. And interestingly, average starting salaries also fell as well. So they fell from about kind of a I think it's about £28,000 to about £26,000. But then that's now both come back. So they're feeling as confident as they were before the pandemic, and they're also feeling very bullish on their salaries. And also to pick up on that point around contacts, so 24% of state school educated students feel that a lack of contact network really does kind of hold them back when it comes to getting a job. And interestingly, private school students are far more likely to do internships. So if you think, you were talking about kind of big companies earlier, half of those big companies fill their roles through internships. 66% of state school students have done an internship versus just 50% of state school students. Yeah. So we really need to get kind of young people.
And that might go back again to parental contacts, general culture, your sense of what's normal. Your sense of how people live, right?
Exactly. When I was at university, both mum and dad had left school at 16. I could see the students who were running off to get jobs. Often they had kind of older brothers or sisters or family connections. And what we do at Bright Network is try and use kind of data and curation to put that network around each of our members. So we work with over 250 of the world's big employers. And it's great. They fund us to put this support around every undergraduate in the country.
Now, Sophie, you went to a state school, a very good state school with very high levels of academic achievement, one that I know well myself. Did you ever feel that you were held back? Because where you live on the border of Essex and Cambridgeshire, lots of very prestigious private schools, lots of people getting into top universities, but a lot of people from your school did that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of I was fortunate to go to a really great school. But I think what James was saying about that network is something I really lacked. I live with my mum and she didn't go to uni, and none of my siblings went to uni before me. And I went to a uni where there was a lot of privately educated people. So I definitely felt that gap there, and that confidence gap came from not having the same network as a lot of the people that I was around at university. But yeah, as I said, I was fortunate to go to a really great school, but I definitely lacked that network to pursue my career.
What would you say to this argument that now the top universities are actually discriminating against people from independent schools because they want to fill their quotas, which the government is pushing on them, to get people from state schools? And it tends to be people from, with all due respect to you, you've done brilliantly well, state schools in leafy parts of the country, from affluent parts of the country. So there's still some discrimination going on.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think filling quotas is a very dangerous thing. I think obviously takes away the actual person that is kind of getting that role at university. But no, I do agree with you. There is still that kind of issue there by those state-educated state schools which are in those more affluent areas. For sure.
Is there still a class system in Britain? Is it holding you back? You seem to be doing pretty well.
I think I'm doing well, yeah. But I think there is an element of the class system. You know, I'm still friends with people who are from very different backgrounds to myself. So I definitely feel that gap, which is something when it came to pursuing my career. A lot of people I know got experience off the back of family networks and friends, whereas mine was very much on my own back. And it took a lot longer and it was a lot harder, I would say.
You had to bang the doors down.
Yeah, something like that.
Justin, you've spent a lot of your professional life in the City of London. It was a gentleman's club. It was an old boys' club. How is it these days?
All of that got broken down, thank God. Big bang, saw a lot of that.
In the mid-80s?
It depends on which father, choose your father, but which regiment they were in, by the way, male only, of course, and, of course, which regiment, which college they went to, any of those sort of things. Oh, and you could divide it up by religion as well. So it's Catholic, Jewish or Protestant, you weren't one of those, you got a problem. If you've chosen the wrong house, you got a problem. And it swapped from that, became then a greedy meritocracy. So you can be what you like, but you make loads of money and got too greedy and we saw the bonus culture come in. It's now moved a bit back from that. But nonetheless, it's still there underneath it. The big difference I found between the private and the state ones recruiting people was actually the confidence. The ones in private school were given more confidence, almost felt they sometimes had a right to it. You had to knock them on the head for that.
Sometimes quite off-putting, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's going into schools and teaching them about certainly economics and things like that and how they build their careers. Once they know actually what the rules are, how they can go about it, what people are looking for, and it's not just the exams, that makes a difference.
What's the answer here, James? Why does this research matter, not just to the broader economy, but to society?
Well, we know we've got 1 million unfilled vacancies. And the more we can unleash the talent in the country, the more economic activity we'll have. We've got 1 million firms sitting there wanting to give people the right jobs. At the moment, 50% of graduates and roles that, the research varies, about 30 to 50% of graduates and roles that don't actually require a degree. And also making sure that firms are accessing that talent pool, because the broader they can reach, the more talent they can access. Interestingly, firms are doing some really interesting things. So we're at 250 top employers. So things like scrapping CVs in terms of when they're looking at recruitment, scrapping grades, using more sophisticated testing, because there was a Harvard...
So psychometric testing.
Yeah, psychometric testing, absolutely.
That you can't sort of be coached for. It's just personality driven. It's about your innate ability.
Absolutely, 100%. And interesting, there's a disconnect and there's more education needs to be done for young people around understanding what employers are looking for. So students in our research, in the Bright Network research, it shows that they think it's academic grades and also how much they know about the industry. Actually, firms don't really care. They care about tenacity, so how resilient these young people are, and they also care about problem-solving skills as well. So making sure students have a better education means they'll be unleashed to build the workforce of tomorrow.
We're out of time, but I just want to ask you, Sophie, you're going to be a very successful person. It's just absolutely clear to everybody in the studio and watching and listening to this show. Would you educate your kids privately if you could afford it?
I don't think necessarily, no. I think I had a really good education, stay educated, and yeah, I think it taught me a lot of lessons, I would say.
Good for you. Sophie Reynolds, state-educated, future corporate leader, future cabinet minister, it seems, and indeed James Uffindell of Bright Network. Thanks for bringing this research to our attention. And indeed, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Yep. See you next time. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. Now, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is the result of complex historic tensions, and few people understand the economics surrounding this conflict better than the world-renowned Swedish economist Dr. Anders Östlund. He's a leading specialist on economic policy in Russia, Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and he served as an economic advisor to several governments since the collapse of communism, including those of Russia and Ukraine. The author of multiple books, including Russia's Crony Capitalism, The Path from Market Economy to Kleptocracy, Anders Östlund is my latest guest on Money Talks. Anders Östlund, thank you so much for joining us here on The Money. I was living in Russia in the mid-90s. I remember your work well. We've got many colleagues in common from that time. We both believed in the development of capitalism in Russia. We were both relatively optimistic about Russia back in those mid-90s days. Are you still optimistic?
No, I think that now Russia has really come back to 1990, before you and I came to work together in Moscow.
And Anders, were you surprised that Putin invaded Ukraine? Obviously, there was a build-up of troops, but many specialists on Russia, many people who had a long track record of analysing, living in, reporting on the country, were taken by surprise.
Yeah, I was not taken by surprise. I look back in my latest book that you so kindly mentioned, Russia's Crony Capitalism, and my basic prediction is that Putin will go for an attempted small victorious war. I did not think before that it would go for the whole of Ukraine, but I think that the US intelligence was very good and very credible and very well communicated to us all. So it looked as if Putin was really going to a madman attack on the whole of Ukraine, and that's what we are seeing. Putin is a man of war. His popularity peaked at 88% in 2008 when he attacked Georgia, and in 2014 when he annexed Crimea. So he has been shopping around for some nice small war that could be victorious. The surprise is that he went for something so big as the whole of Ukraine.
When you look at the current situation, Professor Östlund, these sanctions that the West has imposed on Russia, I'm certainly surprised at how harsh those sanctions are, how unified those sanctions are. There are, of course, gaps. You know, some European Union countries in particular do want to carry on doing lots of business in Russia. But do you think the West can sustain these sanctions, given that Russia is, whether we like it or not, an energy exporting superpower? It's a soft commodity superpower. We talk endlessly here on my show about rising wheat prices, rising barley prices, rising sunflower oil prices, you know, the rising costs of steel and aluminium. A lot of these basic commodities that make our economy run, that make the world go round, do originate in Russia. How long can we maintain these sanctions?
For a very long time, because what has happened in Europe is really a complete change. When Russia attacked Ukraine on the 24th of February, the whole of Europe came together. And by the 28th of February, we saw massive sanctions on Russia. Previously, the US and the UK have been the hardliners. Now, all of a sudden, the European Union came out for tougher sanctions than the US and the UK had advocated. And therefore, I think it will hold. And we've also come to the situation that the sanctions are not driven by governments. They are driven by activists, Just think of it, 500,000 people in Berlin were protesting against the war and against Russia's aggression. This is something quite extraordinary. So all of a sudden the European Union has come together, the US and the UK and also Canada. So there's a united collective West. And what is happening now is that nobody wants to deal with Russia. You're a bad person if you deal with Russia, state companies or private companies. So Russia has simply become a no-go area. No decent businessman wants to risk his reputation or her reputation by going to Russia. Therefore, I think that the sanctions will be sustainable, and we hear now all the time tougher sanctions. The main complaint now is that the financial sanctions, which are very tough, are not complete. I think they will become complete. Then the oil and gas exports are now subject to sanctions. The International Energy Agency expects that about half of the Russian oil exports will not take place in April. About 3 million barrels a day will be taken off the market. The gas is a problem, but it will be sorted out because Russian gas has simply become poisonous. It's too toxic to touch, so you want to get out of it as fast as possible. Too unreliable. And next we have the question of shipping. I think that shipping is the last hole that will be completed, and I should add perhaps insurance. Because if you sanction insurance for Russian subjects, then you have got it all.
Professor Aslan, finally, you've put a lot of your adult life into the Russian reform process. You were one of the leading advisors to the Russian government in the 90s, and you know how hard the progress that was made. You know how hard won that progress was. So I ask you, in all honesty, what's a good scenario here? What's the best case scenario that can happen given that we are where we are?
I might frighten you, Liam, that I think the best case scenario is a complete collapse, so that we get back to 1989-90, that people understand that this authoritarian kleptocracy that Putin has built is not a sustainable system, so that we have to start from the beginning. And the two big things that needs to be done that were not done when we were working there, it's first, full democracy. With early democratic elections at all levels, and secondly, prohibit the FSB, just dissolve it altogether. Well, I should add the third element, of course, building a judicial system. The problem in the 1990s was we were all economists. We did not have political scientists, and we did not have lawyers, because there were no strong reformers among them.
Well, Anders Aslan, fascinating talking to you. You are the author of Russia's Crony Capitalism, The Path from Market Economy to Kleptocracy. And thank you for coming on my show and being my latest guest on Money Talks at this crucial, historic juncture. Now let's bring in some of your views before we finish the show today. On the cost of a pint, Alex says fewer people drinking fewer drinks means a boost to the NHS in the future as alcoholic disease decreases. That is an upside. Rick says the Bank of England's responsibility is to keep the CPI at 2% or less. That's a consumer price index measure of inflation. Why don't you get Andrew Bailey in the studio, the Bank of England governor, to justify his £500,000 salary? Well, Andrew, you're always welcome. Come on. On education, Robert says the most important element in how people do at school is their parents. Some read to their children from an early age and take an interest throughout their educational years. Others have little or no educational ethos. And on inflation, Richard emailed gbviews@gbnews.uk to say the only inflation we need is for On the Money to be doubled to 2 hours a day. 1 hour isn't enough. Richard, you're trying to kill me? Crikey. Thanks for emails today and your tweets. That's all we got time for. Thanks for joining me, and tune in at 1 p.m. tomorrow as the legend that is Alistair Stewart will be hosting On the Money in my place because I'm off for a 2-day break. Very well deserved. I couldn't wish for a better host to keep my seat warm while I'm away. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. And until Monday from me, but tomorrow with Alistair Stewart, that was On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. We keep some brightness in the north and the far south today, but there'll be rain and snow in between with cold air moving south. In fact, the air source is from the North Pole. It's very cold air that's now arriving into Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England through the day. A cold front bringing that cold air. Ahead of the front, we keep some mild conditions and some sunshine for South Wales, South West England. 1 or 2 showers developing here, but this is our band of rain associated with the cold front moving through Northern Ireland, arriving into North Wales, Northern England, the Midlands and East Anglia. There'll be some snow over the hills as that pushes south, and much colder air arrives across Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland with further wintry showers here, a mixture of snow and hail with some accumulations over hills. Into the evening, the band of rain, sleet and hill snow moves into southern parts of the country. Increasingly, we'll see some of that snow coming down to lower levels, some settling over the Chilterns, for example, the Cotswolds perhaps at lower levels as well. Some slushy deposits mainly over grass. But don't be surprised, say in the southeast, if you wake up to some snow cover first thing, and there'll be further snow showers coming into the north and the east with some icy patches around first thing. The rain, sleet and snow tends to ease off in the southeast, but it's going to stay windy here with that wind feeling cold and touching gale force in the far southeast around exposed coasts. And temperatures are 3 to 6 Celsius in the north and the east, 8 degrees further west, but all areas will experience a biting wind chill with that wind coming directly from the north. There'll be some brightness though around on Thursday with the best of the sunshine in the west. Further showers coming through during the evening across the north of Scotland and eastern England, and a widespread frost to wake up to on Friday morning, but a bright start, and for many it's looking like a fine day despite the chill. Temperatures then slowly recover through the weekend.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.